Welcome to the Connected Teamwork podcast by Growth Leaders Network. How do we learn to truly thrive together? How do we stay connected to our authentic selves, each other, and our purpose as a team, especially when challenged? How do we unlock the deeper levels of group intelligence? Enjoy this episode of the Connected Teamwork podcast and learn practical tools to evolve the connectedness of your team to its next level.
Welcome. I'm Olena Sergeyeva with Growth Leaders Network, and we are here today to explore the topics of connected teamwork with Joseph Davis. And Joseph is a cybersecurity professional, a thought leader, a practitioner with what seems like lifelong of experience working with um, diverse teams of C-level and others across countries and across functions. So, looking forward to the conversation today. And before we start, we usually check in, just saying how you feeling and what's your intention for today. So, I'm gonna say that um, I there was a bit of a break between the last podcast I led and today, so I'm excited that this is happening today, and I can enjoy the meaningful dialogue about the themes that I find really really important in today's world, being as disconnected as it is. So we're going to focus on connectedness, we're going to focus on teamwork, and my intention is basically to explore together and to learn from you, Joseph, and to help our listeners to learn too. So with that, I'm in, and over to you, Joseph. How are you feeling and what's your intention?
Yeah, I'm feeling invigorated, excited. I hopefully I can impart some pearls of wisdom along the way. Of course, none of them are originally from me. I've been exposed to some great thought leaders over the 30 years I've been in cybersecurity and health and life sciences, and hopefully I can impart some of those pearls of wisdom to your audience today.
Thank you. We really appreciate you being here with us today. And I guess to just start, let's just talk about what connectedness means to you and why it matters in the field that you are in.
Oh, connectedness goes all over the place in the field that I'm in. But the first thing, when you brought this up, the first thing I started to think about, well, there were two things, but they both revolve around incident response. And if your audience doesn't know, incident response is a practice that takes place when we find potentially a threat actor or a hacker connected to either a cloud resource or internally. It really doesn't matter where, but what ultimately what we're trying to do is eject that threat actor or eject that hacker. And that can be very stressful for the team, right? So the first thing I thought of was a time when we were doing this at a very large company I worked for, a multinational company. We had just acquired another company. That other company had hackers on their network. Unfortunately, the two networks got connected together, the enterprise network and that network of the acquired company. And then we had threat actors on our network. But it really did, based on what the threat actors were doing, it took a massive toll on my staff to try and root that threat actor out. And a lot of individuals took it personally, and that the threat actor was taking their user IDs and using them to pivot around the network, etc. And the sense of belonging to a team, that hey, we've got your back. It doesn't matter what this threat actor is doing. Listen, nothing bad is going to happen to your job. You're not, this is not your fault. Those types of things come to mind. So that's, connecting this is basically being a leader. In my experience, being a leader for your team if you're in that role. The second thing I thought about was I give quite a few, if not dozens a year, Cyber Defense Operations Center tours for Microsoft. So Microsoft has this Cyber Defense Operations Center. We've got 4 locations, but the main location's in Redmond, Washington, and we give the tours to all the customers that come through that ask for a tour. and we call it the CDOC, Cyber Defense Operations Center, CDOC. Well, every time I give a tour now and post pandemic, I have to preface it with saying, listen, there's not going to be a lot of people on the watch floor because they're all working remotely. So during the pandemic, obviously we couldn't come into a facility because of the risk of exposure to the COVID virus. So what we were trying to do is just basically do that incident response, but do it over Teams, do it over our connected technologies. And for a staff to be able to stay connected when working remotely, just an amazing feat. And they continue to do it now. And we had some major incidents during that time that we were able to successfully eradicate the threat actor, if you will, and do the investigation and figure out what was going on and figure out what they took advantage of and fix those things, etc. But that was all done over communication technology. It wasn't done in person. And, as somebody who kind of grew up in IT before the pandemic, I always find it amazing that we're able to accomplish the same things and more when we're working from home. And one of my customers asked me, and it was back on Friday, do you think you get more productivity from your team when they're home or more productivity when they're working together? Well, that's kind of a give and take, but I mean, studies have shown that you're going to work longer when you're working remotely because you somehow you lose that sense of time. But the other thing I've noticed too is that when we were all working together on a problem, we would stay very late into the evening because we felt that responsibility to each other to make sure that everybody was covered, that you had enough people working the problem. Nobody wanted to walk away. It was almost like, if you think about a battle, you don't want to walk away from that battle in the middle of the battle. So that's connectedness, is basically keeping the mission at the forefront, leading with purpose, being very transparent and empathetic to your teammates. Those are some of the things that come to mind.
Thank you, Joseph. Lots of, well, first of all, thank you, because I'm learning lots of useful expressions for myself that I'm going to be using now in speaking about the topic, but also thank you for raising quite a few important themes, right? And so I want to just focus on some of them a little deeper, like the first example that you described, right, was the two, let's say, network and groups merging, which seemed like kind of healthy and unhealthy thing merging together, and then having lots of stress around this, right? And individual stress, collective stress, organizational stress, I'm sure. And you talked about the importance of being a leader for your people, right, in that type of situation, particularly. Because it's very easy to be a leader when everything goes great, sales grow, things are wonderful, celebration time. That's just the joy of being a leader. But that's not what leadership is all about, right? Is it? So a little bit about that. But a lot of leadership, to me, like true leadership, surfaces in those stressful times under huge pressure, also in times of uncertainty, right? So could you talk a little more about what that means to you, that being a true leader for the team?
Sure. I knew I kind of abbreviated that conversation for the interest of time, but really it comes down to make sure you're checking in with everybody on the team, to from the IT side, because those are the folks that in that scenario, those are the folks that connected up the two networks. Unbeknownst to them, there was a hacker on one of the networks that got into the enterprise network, and they felt very, very guilty about that, and really like thinking that they were going to lose their job. So checking in, reassuring, making sure that you have their back to leadership, because if there's somebody above you that's going to make decisions around their continued employment, you want to explain to leadership exactly how these things transpire, and that putting blame at the foot of the employee or deflecting it from leadership is the wrong move, right? And if you do that, you show the rest of your team and all the other teams that one or two mistakes, or not even, you're just going to get blamed for something. So it's making sure you have their back. I got to tell you, the best managers I've ever worked for are managers that I know listen to me. I trust them. You have to build that trust. They're empathetic. They understand that things go wrong. They understand that people make mistakes. They understand that things in life happen. Like sometimes people can't show up on time because they have families and they have illnesses and other things that happen to them, etc. So that's leadership to me is loyalty, building trust, empathy, and making sure you're checking in with your team individually if necessary.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really an excellent summary, and being an advocate for your team in conversations with senior management or other stakeholders, right? And being an educator also, the way I hear you, right? Explaining things that are beyond the expertise or understanding of others, so they have a better, a clearer picture of why things happen the way they happen, right? Yeah, very interesting. And then the second big theme, of course, we could talk more about the leadership also, but the second big theme that you have talked about a moment ago is this whole shift to the hybrid work, right? Or online, pure online for a lot of for many, I don't know how many months, right? And now more and more hybrid, and that presents some unique challenges. I remember when we talked with you in preparation for this podcast, you mentioned something that meetings are scheduled back to back these days, and basically the meeting is focused on the meeting agenda, right? You turn on, you join the link, and there's boom, there is this agenda that you need to go through, things need to be resolved, and so on, and then there is a next meeting, etc., right? So in that kind of environment, how to stay connected, as humans, and again, what should be the leadership role? Or many teams work as self-directed teams, right? They don't necessarily have a appointed leader or something. How should they practice that, human connectedness?
Well, again, it's when you're scheduling your meetings, give some time for a short break between meetings. I mean, some folks are scheduling their meetings not at the top of the hour, but 5 minutes after, and that makes it a little easier to kind of collect your thoughts when you're jumping from one meeting to the next. It's absolutely imperative if you're not working remotely and you actually have to be somewhere, you have to allow for some time. I think about my days in college, and I think many of us had this experience. If you had some sort of, secondary education or college or grad school, where, when you scheduled your classes, if they were back to back, you wanted to make sure you had at least 15 minutes in between so you could get from point A on campus, depending on how large your campus was, to point B, or maybe more time than that. I think the other thing is to also understand that, you know, we've individuals have a lot more going on than just your meeting. You'll schedule a meeting, you find an open space in that free busy time, but keep an eye on the fact that, is that, the 4 or 5 people who you're inviting to the meeting, are all their free time, is it all blocked off just around the time you're scheduling the meeting? That might indicate that they have too much on their plate. You might, if it's possible, if the meeting is not incredibly important, say you're prepping for a customer meeting that's a month out, you might want to push that meeting to a week or a day where it's a little less busy for the people on your team. So I think it's that conscientiousness, right? Just making sure that you understand that you're not, and it's so easy for us to fall into the trap of, oh, it's technology, it's technology. No, there are humans on the other end of that technology. Then you have to take into account that humans get tired, they have things going on. It's difficult for them to stay focused if you keep switching gears on them. Meeting A, we're talking about something. Meeting B, we're talking about something completely different, right? So they need that time in between meetings, and they might need a generous amount of buffer time in order to really get the best out of them if you're going to schedule an important meeting.
Okay, thank you. And I guess what I hear for myself is being really respectful, right, of other people times and lives and priorities and potentially tiredness and emotions and stress and so on, and that taking that into account and measuring how important it is, whatever you want to achieve, and how much time you truly need, right? I've been, and you probably too, I've been through many meetings that, in my view, could have been much shorter and much faster and much, I don't know, simpler. But no, because of all of the, I guess, personalities or stress or whatever was brought into the meeting in the background, right? The meeting is going in all kinds of directions, often without any clear or satisfactory outcome, right? The outcome may be there, but it may not be satisfactory to anyone in the room. So yeah, well, let's talk a little more about like how to align the group or the team around higher purpose or higher meaning, right? Why are we doing what we're doing? Why we're here, and so on, and maybe some experience of doing that from your practice. And we can focus on that after a little short break that we're gonna take now.
You are listening to the Connected Teamwork podcast by Growth Leaders Network. Do you want to learn more about building the next level of connectedness in your team? Please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now, back to the show.
Hi, we are talking today on our Connected Teamwork podcast with Joseph Davis, the leader and practitioner in the field of cybersecurity. And so the question we're going to focus on right now is, in as complicated as this field is and as challenging as it is, what do you view in working with different teams maybe as higher purpose in that, with some examples, and how do you align the group and team or help align around that higher purpose?
Well, anytime you have a team, you have to state your mission. And I remember, this is again not Microsoft, but the company where I was a chief information security officer. We did have a mission and a statement that we went through, so we knew exactly what our goal was, and our goal was to protect the company's assets, and we aligned on that goal, right? So we were able to understand the value of all the assets that were under our care, and then protect them accordingly. But that included many different things, right? So, but keeping the mission at the forefront of every meeting, every time we got together, to remind the team exactly why we were doing what we were doing. And these are highly technical people, very motivated. I work mostly with Type A personalities. The concern that you have with Type A personalities is that they will work a 16-hour day, right? So you have to work with them to pull them back a little bit, because that can lead to burnout very, very quickly, right? And sometimes I think with all this remote work and working late into the evening, we're almost expecting that type of dedication. But to me, that's not dedication. So if they don't take the time they need to wind down, to care for themselves, I think, the popular nomenclature is self-care at this point, then they're not doing the company a favor. They're not doing themselves a favor. So it's really keep the mission at the top, but also explain to them that they're very valuable to the team, and that, burnout, they're susceptible to burnout, and that they'll need to, when they're feeling tired and they need to take a break, they should take a break. They should get a good night's sleep. They should drop when they need to drop, and that the rest of the team will take over when they need a break.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, I can definitely relate to that, because when you talk about Type A personalities, the way I understand it is like high achievers, competitive, result oriented, can work nonstop and so on. However, if you go like this for a long time, it does come at a huge price. And I know that from my own journey where once you hit that burnout point, it's very hard to come back. It's gonna take a long time to feel that same enthusiasm and drive and so on towards and be as passionate as you used to be about that same job and same purpose that you loved. So yeah, speaking of like taking care of yourself, right? Or let's let me use this, being at peace with yourself, right? We call it like connectedness to self also, right? Let me ask you, how do you ensure that you stay connected to self, and what are some of your own tips and findings over the years that work for you?
Well, yeah, it's the 30 years of this. Plus, before I even started in cybersecurity, I was in the health and life sciences field where I was a practitioner, and talking about pressure, I mean, tons of pressure in that field as well. So I picked up some tips along the way. And I don't think, honestly, I think in my 20s and my 30s, I thought I knew the answers. And even in my 40s, I thought I knew the answers, but I think I'm really starting to get it now as I move into my 50s and into my mid 50s. And I I think it really comes from within, right? So rule number one for me is that my thoughts are not reality. My thoughts do
Mm.
not define my life. Thoughts are exactly what they are. They're thoughts, right? So if you're stressed out over something, it's usually the cause of some painful thought, something that's looming in the distance, right? But remember, the future hasn't happened. The future is now, right? So all you can do to affect change, I mean, yes, you can plan for the future, you can do these things, you can worry, 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 but really that's not a good investment of your brain power, right? And it's really difficult for type A personalities to kind of think that way. But understand again that the negative, repetitive, intrusive thoughts, to constantly do better, thinking about the mistakes you've made over and over again, thinking, oh gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I wish I didn't make that mistake. um, just a couple of weeks ago, I was given this big presentation, and unfortunately, I was downstairs in my house. My dog starts barking. Alexa starts saying things on the Amazon thing, and I was just absolutely mortified because I knew it was being recorded and everything. So that was a thought that got into my head, and I had to stop myself and say, wait a minute, you're going to think about this. There's nothing you can do. This has happened. You need to learn from whatever happened there. Maybe next time, get somebody to walk your dog when you're on a big presentation. Don't be in the same room with your dog. Maybe shut off those, connected devices so that they don't interrupt you when you're talking. Those types of things. But beyond that, to ruminate over that thought over and over again, it's just a complete waste of energy, and it really takes its toll on your mental health. So for me, step number one is don't allow your thoughts to become reality.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree with that. And that's something I'm working on in a similar pattern that you described, because I think we are wired in a way where we love to have control over our lives, and having control makes us, mistakenly thinking we should also have control over the future. And that's where all the, or fixing the past, right? That's already gone, but we keep thinking, if only I had blah, 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 right? If only they did da, da, da. So, and same with the future. If scenario A, B, C, right? So I do this. And that's a really exhausting kind of work. So you use, as you said, you invest your brain in the wrong way, and then there is D, right, option that you don't even consider, and you don't even notice when it happens. You can't really embrace it because you're too focused on your three whatever scenarios that you have. So I've had my own fun with that, going over life, particularly in some big transformational phases. Well, let me ask you, we're kind of moving closer towards the end, and also just focusing on connecting to self. By the way, when you said that, when you were 20, 30, you thought you knew it all, and now, like when you're in your 50s, you start kind of seeing the answers. So I was thinking maybe we should connect in our 70s and have a podcast, and then see what you're gonna say about, well, when I was 50, I really thought I got that thing, but now I realize. So that's like, I think that's the beautiful joy of living, is basically ongoing learning, right? That this whole like learning and discovery, and seeing maybe the same phenomena or same things in a very different light as we proceed with our learnings. So I'm also curious, looking from this vantage point over your life, like what do you see as your own, I guess, higher purpose or mission? What you here to do? And I know it's a complicated, big question, but still, it's interesting to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, this was the summer of a reckoning, and I started to think about that question a lot, even before you posted and talked about having this podcast. I think my higher purpose is to bring joy and justice into the world, right? So it's joy from a perspective of, relieving pain and suffering as much as I can in the small ways that I can, bringing joy into people's lives. And the justice part, I always think of, I always think of, do the right thing, right? So how do I bring justice into the world? How do I make the world better, right? What's my definition of better? So that's basically my purpose, is bringing joy into people's lives, or trying to, right? Never leaving a spot messier than when you found it. And bringing justice and righteousness into the world as well, right? Righting the wrongs, correcting the mistakes, yeah, as much as I can. I know that's a lofty goal, but that's something that I think I've been really doing for the last 30 or so years, trying to make things better for people.
That's wonderful. And I'm also, when I'm listening, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, joy, bringing joy, justice, but also there is, in the way I perceive you, there is a lot of kindness. So you may not be thinking about this a whole, lot, but joy and justice also could be brought in a different way, I think. So when it's combined with kindness and kind of accepting that, first of all, kindness maybe to yourself, accepting that you can do only as much, right? So, and then, but also kindness to others, because they may see things differently or be in a very different place from where you are in the moment. So yes, so just focusing on joy and justice, within like next 2 minutes that we have left, what might be some concrete advice or tip to someone, let's say, listening to us today, thinking, I like it. I also want, bringing joy and maybe justice to my team. So what do I do? What do I do this week, or, this month, or today?
Well, the justice part really aligns with my cybersecurity career, right? Righting wrongs and bringing threat actors to justice, if you will. Trying my best to uh, fix the problems out there, because a lot of these cybersecurity incidents are straight out crimes, and some of them, it's very, very difficult to ever find out exactly who did it, but when you can, bringing justice and bringing that up to leadership so they can take action and so forth. So I just wanted to clarify that. But the question again was, how am I bringing joy? Well, kindness is part of the way to bring joy. It's kindness, it's empathy, it's the human touch, if you will. I think once you start to get into these positions of, C-level, if you will, or vice president level, etc., it's easy to kind of lose sight of the fact that everyone's human, that it's not only about your goals, it's about collective goals. So a little bit of selflessness helps, right? And through that comes the kindness, comes the joy, comes the, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that person was thinking of me, right? So if I could do that for someone on a day-to-day basis, like reach out and know and explain and tell them, hey, I'm thinking of you. I know you've been struggling with whatever it happens to be. I'm on your side. If you need my help, let me know. That's really when I start to talk about joy and justice, because it's helping them to find their own joy, right? Helping them with whatever is holding them back. And again, selflessness. I'm not thinking about, well, how can I use this person to get to the next level? Or how can I use this team or this project? Or, shifting the focus a little bit on from yourself to the outside world externally.
And I love it. Thank you, Joseph, because that's also something that I've been really consciously practicing during last several months, like looking at others from a heart place rather than from the brain place, and from a very gentle sort of space. And I love this idea of helping others to find their joy and being selfless in that. Thank you. You've been listening to Connected Teamwork Podcast, and it's me, your host, Olena Sergeyeva, and our guest, Joseph Davis. I really, really appreciate talking to you.
Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me onto this podcast. This was great.
Yeah, and thanks to everyone who is listening to us today.
Thank you for listening to the Connected Teamwork Podcast by Growth Leaders Network. Take a moment to reflect on what you learned today that can help build your team. Also, if you like, think about one of your team members and what you appreciate about them. Let them know. Enjoy connecting more deeply to what is great about them. And see you next time at the Connected Teamwork Podcast.